Welcome to Huddle Up with Matias Bueno. Today's very special guest, all the way from the land of the living skies, Daniella Ponticelli, broadcaster that has her hand in a lot of different things, working as a play-by-play voice of the Regina Rams, as well as a post-game show host on the Sports Cage in Regina, as well as doing sideline reporting. Daniella, it's great to chat with you again. I'm super excited to have you on the show. You've been rocking and rolling and doing great things in industry. I'm really excited.
Hey, it's so great to be chatting with you on your podcast because, yeah, we've had a chance to meet in person. We also had a chance to talk during the pandemic. It feels like still yesterday, but it was a while ago. I mean, you were still trying to figure out everything and just getting the podcast on its feet. So this is a really cool moment. Thanks.
The Riders have had a pretty good season so far, I would say. Obviously, having a winning record is better than having a losing record. Maybe they would like to be higher in the Western Division, but or at least not at the bottom. What do you make as an assessment of how the Riders have performed so far this year? The good, bad, and the ugly.
The good is that I'm seeing development every single game, especially home games, because I get to be on the sidelines. I don't do sideline for away, but you actually see a very tangible sense of composure and understanding. It's like the team has settled into its identity a little bit. It's still trying to find its feet there. So that would be good. I do appreciate that. I do appreciate that we're seeing fewer penalties as of this recording of this podcast. We've been seeing a lessening of that just disastrous amounts of penalties that were being allowed and incurred during the first starting part of the season. And definitely the personnel issues. That would be the bad, going into a bit of the ugly. Of course, we can't forget the Marino incident. That was in a lot of ways a bit of a defining moment for the Riders, because there was a defense of this player, and no matter how you take that, it does show unity within the team. So regardless of your personal opinion on the defense of a player and the allowance of that player to continue being on the team while they serve a suspension and eventually return down the stretch, that's the plan as of now, it does show you that there is a love between this team. And I get to talk to a lot of the players, not only in my role with CKRM and the different Rider game day things, but I also get to talk with them as I do freelance work for the Riders, a lot of storytelling. And it's amazing. We know everyone's got a different kind of story. That's always really impressive. But what I find so telling about this is you get to know a little bit of their insights, and we're seeing more and more players on their own individually just boldly saying, yeah, no, our goal is that Grey Cup. Because there were times where I question, I'm like, is it the goal? I know everyone says it's the goal, and I know that it's in your backyard this year, but you've got to carry yourself with that champion mentality from the get-go. A little bit of adversity, as we know, is not a bad thing. Getting it done early on, being able to adjust, knowing how to come back in situations, knowing how to face different situations and keep a level head. I think this is all good for the team. I know I'm bouncing around here, but the good, the bad, the ugly for sure is just getting that personnel issue under control, understanding that we are champions and we have to be held to a higher degree, a higher standard. And there has been talk at the very least, as of this recording, that maybe the league, there's some officiating discrepancies. I'm not going to wade into that, but my thing is, unfortunately, when you want to be number one, people are going to come out for you. People are going to do things that are going to make that road more challenging. So expect it and be better than it and rise above it.
One question in particular that is going to loom for the rest of the year is Cody Fajardo's health. Obviously,
Yeah.
quarterback choice in the CFL is pretty slim when you consider that many quarterbacks have played on 3 teams or more. The backup situation with almost every team is not ideal for anyone who wants to become a Grey Cup contender. But at the same time, as Fajardo had said during Touchdown Atlantic, some of the concerns he has with the injury is that it could be career altering. Now, obviously, that would be catastrophic for the Riders at this point of the year and would prevent them from getting an opportunity to play in the Grey Cup at home. But what do you think may be the best path forward for the Riders to manage Fajardo's health while ensuring that they still stay in the race towards the playoffs?
Oh, gosh, this is such a difficult question, because it is sometimes hard to put aside your personal feelings for the guy, because you just know how much of a tough champion he is, and he wants this so badly. He's going to be a dad coming up pretty much around the Labor Day weekend time. That's pretty exciting. That's going to be a really intense stretch for the Riders, but also for him and his family that he's growing with his lovely wife. Uh, I think no matter what, they need to maybe get a bit more solid in who their QB number 2 is, because this up and down between is it Fine or is it Dolagala? Well, are you able to maybe have a game plan for that and be more ready for it? I mean, getting to see Dolagala out there in meaningful time and playing a full game from start to finish, that was pretty great. It was great to see that opportunity when it happened. There was a chance for a miracle at Mosaic Stadium. Didn't quite pan out that way. But I do think that it is possible for us to find a rhythm if there is a backup needed, as long as that backup knows, hey, you're number 2, you got this, right? And like that rallying point around the team is there, because if you don't have that piece, it's going to be a lot easier to, or a lot harder to just throw things into the mix. And Jake Dolagala did a fantastic job, considering I can't get over the fact when he was saying that week he started in the game against Toronto here in Regina. Yeah, I was the only quarterback out there for the first 3 practices of the week. That just never happens. You've always got your guys there, you're working together. So incredible circumstances, and people have risen to the occasion. I think more importantly, the O-line needs to get tighter. We got to figure that situation out stat, and the veteran leadership of the team needs to be that bubble. This is a team sport. We know that the quarterback's at the head of the table, but you can't be empty seats everywhere else.
And you mentioned the offensive line, and the loss of Dan Clark has been nothing short of a tragedy for the Riders, considering he's done such a great job in the middle of their line for many years now. And Logan Bandy, young man out of University of Calgary, stepping into a big role and has a lot of room in those shoes to fill in order to keep that offensive line high and tight, when you consider that and maybe this is just an odd year, but I don't know if there's any team in the league that has a really weak D-line. Like every single team has a very solid D-line, just at least from what I've observed. That could be wrong. I don't know.
They're all pretty solid. I mean, when the Riders did their first road test against the Elks, it was a little bit of a different story. There were times when they were able to blow past the D-line a little bit there, but that was honestly, that was early days in the regular season. I almost don't even want to count that, but it's still a valid point. And they're tidying up. You're totally right. Everyone is learning pretty quickly, and now that we're in finally a normal CFL season where it is the marathon, not the sprint, it's not shortened, it's not canceled, we're kind of back to business as usual. I think people are starting to find their rhythm there. Logan Bandy, I have yet to actually talk to him in person, which is wild to me, but I have been impressed, all things considered. I mean, this is a young guy, and Dan Clark will be the first to tell you center is so hard, but it's not hard because of necessarily, it is hard because of the physical job you have to do, but it's so hard because of all of everything else, the football IQ, the mentality. So I know he's trying to help Logan as much as possible too. And he's there, by the way, every game, at least every home game. He rides around on his little knee scooter. It's called a knee rider. I bugged him the other day. I said, do you like that? He's like, no, not at all. I'm so scared this thing is going to fall apart under my weight. But he's got such a great just presence on the sideline at home for the Riders, Dan Clark. And he also, in the very first game that Logan Bandy had to step out and take up the mantle, so to speak, Dan Clark was there on the sideline and cheering, go Logan, like pumping him up. I mean, that's what it's all about to me. And it's remembering that that's his position on this team, and there's a lot on his shoulders, but he's also more than that. And I think he stepped up amazing considering his age. And I think the age part of a center is a big part of it. How much game experience do you have, especially at a pro level? And then you're working with a bunch of new guys, especially in a situation where going out to Wolfville, Nova Scotia, and last minute people getting pulled out of the lineup because of COVID, and then into a week of COVID just sort of messing up the roster completely. So all things considered, I hope I've answered your question. I always do this. I get so excited talking about the people and the players, but Dan Clark, by the way, little update, he is doing great. When I say that, I'm not just saying that. He is rehabbing so hard. He is mentally so strong. The first thing he said to me was, "Oh, I'm ready to go. Like up here, I'm ready to go." That's amazing. So once the physical piece is in, it's going to be great.
And like you said, center, with having a lot of, you need that experience on the inside, but this may be a bit of a blessing in disguise when you think about the
Mhm.
experience it's going to give Logan and Jake and some of the other
100%.
guys who are filling in, because yes, during the middle part of the season, it's tough. Injuries happen. 18 games is a lot longer than people think, especially when you consider how many people the Riders lost to injury last year. But
And
when you
let's
fill
not
in the
forget,
gaps,
sorry,
it's
I don't
only going to help.
mean to interrupt, but
Oh,
let's
yeah.
not forget that the Riders in this first third had injuries. Yes, there were players suspended, but I mean, Shaq Evans getting that injury when it happened, Kyron Moore still not fully out of the off the injured list after being on the sixth game, and now we're in, heading into later weeks, and that's not the case. But we're hoping to get him back very soon. Who I know, oh, Pete Robertson, he's starting to heal up. He was a beast for us out there. We need him, like we need those players back. So he's also keeping in great spirits. I saw him on the sidelines in regular shoes walking around. So again, really great signs. People are healing, people are dialed in, and it's just a matter of getting them out on the field and starting to get those wins.
Now, the West Division is a very competitive race, and the East Division, I would argue, is also as competitive. Maybe not in terms of looking as good on paper with records, but if you were to pick a team in the East to win it right now, who do you think would be? Who do you think can take the East Division?
Oh gosh, the East. Oh, okay. By the time I say this, it's going to be outdated, I feel anyway. But maybe it's because they finally got the back to back on this. But I feel like the Argos could be a slippery Eastern rival. And what I mean by that is a lot of people underestimate Bethel Thompson. And a lot of people are just kind of unsure what kind of Bethel Thompson they're going to get. And that can sometimes be to the advantage of that team, but they found a way to win. They found a way to win against the Riders twice. And you can make excuses that Saskatchewan had this going on, that going on, but a team still got to win. A team still got to show up. And by the way, the Toronto Argos, they were trailing the Riders. Let's not forget that. So they still had to come up and show up and do the work. So give credit where it's due. I think they could be a very slippery opponent in the East, and I could see them sliding their way kind of up the rankings just because of that sort of unknown question mark. What kind of Bethel Thompson are we going to see? But I mean, we can't count out the bull that is Andrew Harris, and we can't count out Speedy Banks. Like and those are just two players I'm just bringing off the top of my head. They've got really um, great personnel there, and they're led by great people on the sideline and in the office. Like I think the effect of Pinball Clemens alone, that'll inspire you to win something, right?
Absolutely. And you mentioned some of the key pieces in their offensive core. Curly Gittens Jr. is like
Oh,
Spider-Man
yes.
pointed at himself with Kean Schaefer Baker, right? Two great young Canadian receivers. And they are kind of like Hamilton last year, like that veteran presence. Sometimes they're on, sometimes they're off, but it's anything is possible in the CFL, especially in any division that's really tightly contested. I would also agree the Argos are probably the team that might win the East, at least from a regular season standings point of view. Maybe not necessarily go to the Grey Cup, but again, only time will tell at this
Yeah.
point.
I mean, when we were talking wild predictions way, way, way before the regular season even started, I just threw Hamilton out in the mix because they're a team, not only because, of course, they did so well last season, but they're just one of those gritty teams that find a way to win. So I agree with you 100%. Anything can go in the CFL. Me picking the Argos is certainly not because I have an affinity for that team. I really don't, but it does speak to how great it is. And I just wish we could see more of those of that love and that hype in the East. I think it's growing. It's getting there. It's a bit of a slower start to the season, but it's a long way to go. It's a long way to go.
Now for the West, based on the way the standings have gone so far, again, this could change if Eastern teams start stacking wins, but it's looking like there's going to be a crossover. And so
Mm-hmm.
a crossover team winning the Grey Cup, I don't know if it's ever happened. I don't know if even a crossover team has ever even made the Grey Cup, but if you were to pick a crossover team right now, based on the information you have today on July 28th, who would you pick as the crossover team in the West?
Can I say this? If it's the Riders, we're going to the Grey Cup. And if we're in the Grey Cup, we're going to win it. That's all I got to say about that. If it's the Riders, and it could be because we're in that sort of middle mix pack there. If it is, and we go fight for our chance to play at home, I think that's going to be more than motivation enough with a good, healthy crew and a strong quarterback.
Now, who do you think would be the team that would fall into that mix to potentially cross over as well? Because obviously the Riders are maybe looking a little bit more down right now, but there also still the chance that they flip flop and go to Calgary for the first game, or that they host Calgary, depending on how things go.
Yep.
Who would you pick as the next team to go into that other potential crossover spot?
Gosh, with the standings as it is, I mean, is it the Elks? Are we looking at the Elks, or are we? This is where it becomes tricky. I guess at that point, I would put it on BC, right? That would be my best guess there. Is that BC is coming out so strong again. People are figuring out Nathan Rourke a bit better, but you also can't figure out someone who's never played a full season as starting quarterback, and he has got so many tricks up his sleeve. I'm really excited. Like, from a football loving perspective, it's great to see. So yeah, how about that? I'll put my money on the BC Lions in that mix. If they're not, obviously, like, yeah, thinking that Winnipeg is going to be up there, Calgary, and if we're not the crossover, then that would be my pick.
It's always tough to predict exactly how it'll shake down, or even too, if a team crosses over, sometimes it looks like an easy path, but then I know the Riders, I think it was in 2017, they crossed over and they played the Argos and it seems like an easy win. And ironically enough, Cody Fajardo was the one that scored a QB sneak touchdown under a
I
minute left to
know.
help them lift them to the Grey Cup. That, like, you became the very thing you swore to destroy. It made me it made me kind of chuckle a bit when you look forward into the future. But again, the CFL, like we talk about with quarterbacks, is so small that Kolaros has played for the Riders and the Ticats and the Argos and the Bombers. And you look at Fajardo, he's played in the Argos, he's played on the Riders. Harris has played on how many teams now? The list just goes on and on. And there's very few, actually, I think, that only have played for one team. I think as far as starters go, obviously besides Rourke, because he's only been in the league for a few years, I think Mitchell and Bethel Thompson
solid, right?
would be
Yeah.
the only ones that have only played for one team.
Yeah. Um, are you talking about, like, whether I think it'll be an easier path in the East? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
No, I don't think that at all, based on the fact that the Riders started off as the only Western team to lose to an Eastern opponent not once but 3 times. So there's that. I think too that we just play so well, not only at home but against the enemy we know. And I would love to see that Western matchup again in the playoff, because we have had success there, especially in the last few years. So I really don't think it's the easier path. In fact, there's a lot more unknowns there. What can we see? What kind of playoff team would an Eastern opponent be for us, who've had such a long history of making it long history recent history of it being in the Western playoffs, and kind of leading the charge there, even going right to the semifinal, right, or the final, sorry, last year. So yeah, I think that that's sort of the roundabout answer to that question. I really don't think that would be the easier path, because there's no such thing, and it would be so much better to go with the enemy we know that much more.
Now, I want to take a bit of a broader look at some of the work that you've been doing as someone who's dove deep into Saskatchewan Roughriders football as well, working with the Regina Rams. You have had a great amount of success being able to cover university games, work doing local stuff in Manitoba, in Saskatchewan. Have a little bit of 15 minutes of fame with Mr. Sawyer Bittner there on the sideline in what became
Forever.
a very iconic interview. What was it that got you into loving football so much?
Well, it started no, we won't go all the way back. Honestly, it was finally as an adult going to CFL games. And I know that that's not always something that everyone can do. I understand, whether it's you don't have access to it, it's not in your backyard, or it is hard as a young professional to sometimes get the time, have the money, all those things. But I found myself in the wonderful, unique situation of being in Regina. I had obviously gone to Rider games before while living up in Saskatoon for a number of years working there, but to actually finally be in the city. And then I even, like, my place is a walk away from Mosaic Stadium. So game day walking, going through the park, seeing everyone in their green as they head to the stadium, and just that part alone sold me on it. Not to mention that there was really great characters, whether you love him or hate him. Head coach Chris Jones, he was pretty exciting to follow at that time. And I was working in media, and like just all the different things of like, this person's doing this move is happening. And it just, once you kind of get a little bit into it, you kind of go fully into it. I don't know what it's like for you, but I can't do things that's 50% or 60%. I have to be 100. So as soon as I kind of got the bug for it, I really dove in. Now that shows you a bit of how recent the like a compulsion, if you will, obsession, maybe that's a better word, happened for me. But the CFL has always been part of my Canadian life. I moved to Winnipeg in 2000. I know, Winnipeg, everyone says it, but it was my home, right? I mean, I was a kid. I don't get to choose where I go. But we moved. My mom was recruited from Cape Town, South Africa. That was our home. Yeah, our home. And I do remember going to see a couple Bomber games here and there. I think my dad would sometimes get some tickets through work, or like, I was a girl guide, and they would sometimes do like group bookings, which by the way, you should always be doing that. Bring the girl guides out, let them see a game. You never know what's going to happen. And so I remember that, and we would go in all different kinds of weather. So I was never one of those kids that was like, I've only seen football in summer. I think the first games were all kind of fall, winter games, right? And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the atmosphere. I didn't really know the sport, and that kind of scared me a little bit, as a teenager, like, oh, I like going to the games, but I don't feel like I know anything that's going on. And my family, they didn't know what was going on. Like they didn't know the rules of the game. But it took actually just being in a Canadian high school, seeing friends of mine who played football and actually going to see a game. All of that just kind of like adds year after year. You get a little extra layer, a little extra appreciation for the grassroots of the game, and then to the CFL. And Winnipeg is a big CFL city. So there you go. And my introduction to the Riders was on a bus from Saskatoon to Regina for a Labor Day game. I was in green and white because there's no way I'm sitting there in any other colors. And I wasn't really a Bombers fan. I hate to say it. I think I owned a t-shirt, and I did go to a couple games, and I would wear the t-shirt because I do like to, I don't know, you want to get into it. But I didn't have like a connection. It was really here in Saskatchewan that like the roots were laid. And that's how it went. I hope that answered your question a bit, but that was how it all developed. And then I was a journalist that whole time, a news journalist that whole time. And I started getting into sports through lacrosse, through the Saskatchewan Rush Lacrosse Club. And once you're kind of in it, you start to see, oh, there's an opportunity here because this is my off season. How is this going to go? And like you meet people and you kind of figure out what you could maybe do. And I ended up working for the Rider games, but the in-house broadcast team. So for the 2019 season, for at least 9 games, no, maybe at least 7, I would say at least 7 games, I was on the Cody Fajardo cam. I was on the quarterback ISO cam, and then I ended up kind of doing some different angle shots, and eventually getting to did some handheld work, and then eventually ended up doing assistant directing in the back there. So it's just kind of wild, right? How you get this introduction, and the broadcast booth was always nearby, and I kind of put that in my mental note that one day that's where I want to be. Like I love what I'm doing now. I love what I'm learning. That's where I want to be. And if you can visualize that, I'm a big believer in visualization. If you can visualize where you want to go, put in the work. Do not be mistaken here. People can come at me for this. You can talk about manifesting things all day long, but if you're just going to sit and go, I manifest this, or put it on Twitter and say, I manifest, that's one step. That is one step. And I'm not faulting people for like putting that out there publicly. But if you think that's going to give you the accountability to have self-discipline, it probably isn't. You need to start developing the discipline even before you start putting things out publicly. Keep it to yourself. Go for those goals, and you will get there, but you got to put in all that work.
Who is someone that inspired you as a broadcaster growing up, or even in recent years, if it wasn't when you were a young kid?
I'm always going to go back to, and this is wild, I don't think people are even going to hopefully people will know who she is. Winnipeg folks might remember her. But Jennifer Rattray was a reporter and a news anchor at CKY Winnipeg, which became CTV. And the reason why I'm always going to cite her as an inspiration is she interviewed our family as we got off the plane, pretty much as we got off the plane. Like we were in the airport, and she was doing a story about this huge influx of my mom's a radiation therapist. So, this huge influx of international radiation therapists to the country. And I don't know what it was, but meeting her, I was like, oh, wow, this is the coolest thing. It was like, this is so neat. There's even by the way, I ended up working for CTV and I got all that archived footage from that day. So I actually have that day. And there's a one little piece of video where I'm literally just staring like, you're amazing. Like the work you do is so cool. Like I'd never seen that before. So I'm always going to cite her as an inspiration because after that point, my family always watched the nightly news and she was always that person. I was like, yeah, Jennifer, it's weird. It's like those little interactions. And then from there, I mean, you've got to just talk about your Hockey Night in Canada cruise, like people like Ron McLean. I mean, Peter Mansbridge, I know we're talking more news side, just huge icons of this industry and how they tell stories and how they don't always do the same thing over and over and over again. They do different things. Sometimes they're out traveling the country and all of that. I would say right now, in terms of a broadcaster who is contemporary and always doing amazing things, and I wish I had his energy, Devin Haru, hands down with CBC Sports. I love what he does. And I love what he does because it's all authentic. I mean, sure he'll get stats and information that anyone can access, but he always personalizes it. He brings himself into the story, but in a way that is so genuine that you want that. Like some people will insert themselves in a story and you're like, okay, that didn't add to it. He is just there. He's telling you like, this story is told by me, it's my experience, and then here's all the athletes that I'm going to introduce you to. And I always think of it as like if we were to be in the same room at a social event, it would be like walking up to a table and goes, hey, come here, I want to show you. Right? That's always what you got to think about when it comes to broadcasting. You want to introduce everybody in, but you're still part of it, and you just kind of want to make everyone get to know each other, get to take something away from that interaction, and go forward.
Yeah, Devin is someone who's absolutely phenomenal at what he does. He brings so much energy that I resonate with, and I think a lot of people do, more than just myself. And that's what really creates those engaging moments and connections that you just don't forget, right? Like it doesn't have to be from a specific sport or something like that. When you look at the broadcast booth, when you watch a CFL game, when you watch the Olympics, whatever it is, that's what brings people in. And I think that's why when people talk about marketing the CFL or how can we engage new fans, the CFL is for everybody, right? No matter where you come from or who you are. And there's so much proof for that everywhere across the league. And I think the more that people get exposed to the stories that are of the ordinary fans and just the regular people that grew up loving a team, like the work you've been doing with the Riders, whether it's the Bombers, even if it's Argos, doesn't matter how popular or unpopular they are comparatively between fan bases. That's what makes the league so great, is that it's got a long history and it's not just glitz and glamour. It's like real people that come together as communities. And even, I'm sure you can, even just talking a little bit about some of the people you've interviewed recently doing work for the Riders about why they became fans. And even if someone like myself who grew up from Winnipeg,
Yeah.
You can always appreciate and love and say, I'd rather have, it doesn't matter what team you're from. If you love the CFL, that's the most important thing. Whether you're from Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, Toronto, Hamilton, doesn't matter. No rivalries are bigger than the league itself.
Exactly. And you need the teams and you need the fan bases. I don't know if you need me to say that again. My internet connection apparently isn't great.
Oh, no. I can hear you.
Oh, we're good. We're going to keep rolling.
Perfect.
Yeah, but you need the teams and you need the fans. And that's why I will share and like anything that, if another fan is praising something that happened and is having a great time, give it to me, give it all to me. I said it before at Touchdown Atlantic. I can't be out in Nova Scotia, but I will happily enjoy liking all of your posts, because to me that's joyful. I know not everyone loves to see other people having a good time because it's the internet, but I'm here for it. And I also want to just give a shout out to Doris Burke, hands down, when it comes to just a phenomenal voice behind the mic, a woman, a great influence. But I mean, a lot of my inspirations and influence are male, because that's right now who's been the most consistent when we're talking about play by play. We're talking about being in the booth and stuff like that. So it'll change, and I'm happy it's going to all change. So yeah, that's someone else I want to mention too.
And you'll be the person who's at the forefront of leading that change, at least as far as being in Canada goes.
Hey, that's really nice. I mean, one of the things that I just want to quickly mention too is that uh I've said this in other interviews too, but like, we all have to stand on the shoulders of the people who are there before us, who are here now, opening up doors and allowing, you know, more people to kind of step through. And as much as that has been phenomenal women who have come before me, 100%, it is on men too. And I always like to mention that, because some of the greatest believers in my work and in giving me an opportunity are men. So it's not, it is about gender, and it's not about gender. It's about recognizing a need for new perspectives, for allowing a broader and newer kind of approach to broadcasting in general. And especially in Canada, we've seen some really great work in hockey when it comes to some of the other language telecasts and things like that. There's room for all of this. I would love to see a Saskatchewan, or see or hear rather, a Saskatchewan Roughrider game called in Cree. I would love to see a Saskatchewan Rush game as well, in particular because lacrosse is the medicine game. It belongs to the Indigenous people who have so amazingly shared that gift with everybody. I'd love to see more Indigenous language broadcasts, because even if the majority of a certain city might not understand it, it's representation. It's opening up the door, and it's also a really amazing step towards reconciliation when considering the barriers around language for so long in this country. So it's like, it's a huge gesture, and that would be amazing. I'm not the one to do it. Happy to see other people take it and run with that.
Of course, and when seeing with what the Elks had done with their broadcast just not more than 2 weeks ago from this recording was amazing. And again, they have CBC in Nunavut now, and they did the broadcasts for the men's and women's ice hockey games just this past winter. It's not that, you don't need to be number one in the Nielsen ratings with somebody watching it or listening to it, but all it takes is just a few people that see it and their lives change, or they are inspired to go forth and create a huge impact. And I love to give this analogy to when people question it. People get very hasty with something like the Arizona Coyotes, and that now you may think, oh, that's very, very weird. Like, Arizona seems so insignificant. And people always get upset about the fact that, yes, they play in some small arena, or they're on life support as a franchise. But part of the initiative in bringing hockey to those markets is places where people don't know and aren't exposed to the game. So that the hope is one day some kid will grow up and be inspired, some guy or girl, whatever, will get a chance to play hockey in a place that was not exposed to the sport before, and can make a bigger impact on the game than the team itself. Case in point, Austin Matthews, growing up in the greater Phoenix area, getting a chance to play. And the NHL has more than received their return on investment from having a team in Arizona, just based on the fact that he alone ended up becoming a superstar who was originally from there. Now, obviously in Canada, there doesn't really need to be that injection. Guys and girls across the country love playing the sport. But when you think about doing games in other languages, especially with lacrosse, it's a perfect example. You never know who it could inspire and how that could create a greater impact on the game for generations to come.
Yeah, and we do need, like, in the hockey space, we do need more diversity too, right? And when I say need, I mean you can't keep running at the sort of operating at the level you're at and being pretty much exclusive in a lot of ways, even when you don't want to be. Like, I love that there's this mantra of this game is for everyone, this game is for everyone. We've got to live and breathe it. We've got to be in intent with what we want to do. And I say we because it is a call to action for everybody on that list there. And the other side of it too is start with a couple of these sort of specialty games, but then eventually, hopefully down the line, you can get some consistency when it comes to the broadcasts. Because one of the biggest things, one of the big reasons why the University of Saskatchewan Huskies broadcast this past season made history was it was the first time a private broadcaster in Canada uh, committed to a full season of women's hockey. Excuse me, what? How? Like, to me, that was mind blowing. A private broadcaster. I believe there was one example where a university campus radio did cover a team for a season, but we're talking about every home game, away game, and the women's team, which I was covering, went all the way to nationals. That was incredible. So to be there and to cover every single game, wow. And it's just par for the course when it comes to men's sports, right? So that was the other side to it. It was so eye-opening. And I know I'm going overtime now, but it was so eye-opening to get to talk with some of the players, the women that I got to meet who had never been interviewed before for the sport. Where normally I meet guys at the U Sports level, or I mean at that point even earlier than that in the SJ or whatever. This is old hat for them, right? They're so used to, yeah, sure, I'll come do a little sideline interview with you, which is great. I want them to have the media exposure. I want the women to have the media exposure, or at least to get the practice in, so that when they then go on and become professional level hockey players in the national team, hopefully, or somewhere else, and when there's more professional women's leagues out there, then they can be great ambassadors and be just as comfortable and confident as all the guys when they get to that point where they're in the NHL. And by the way, the women have a lot of personality. I love it. They haven't had it trained out of them. So that's the other fun part about doing interviews with them.
Daniella, we are getting towards the end of our time on today's episode, so I did want to wrap up with a few more fun questions to have
okay.
a little bit more of a good time before we part.
All right.
Okay. What is your favorite sports movie?
Sports movie. Oh, okay. This is a heartbreaker, but I'm gonna go with Friday Night Lights. That one stays with me. I don't know if a favorite. Sure, we're gonna go with favorite, but that one makes me feel things, and I like to feel things, I guess.
If you had the opportunity to interview any athlete who's still active, who would it be and why? In any sport, doesn't matter.
Who is still active? Oh, this might seem so on the nose. I would love to talk to Steph Curry. I really would. I just want to talk to him about this, about his family. Like, it's more so that part of it. Like, what was it like, growing up and going through, and I'm sure he's been asked that a million times, but I would love to get to hear it from him. And he just seems like such an interesting character. And especially he's, at the height right now of everything that he's doing. And he has faced adversity and he has changed a game completely. Everyone knows it's the 3-point game in basketball now. So he would definitely be up there.
What's been your favorite career moment as a broadcaster up to this point?
We're gonna narrow that to sports broadcasting.
Yes.
I would have to say, I mean, I could go very easily and say the Sawyer Bittner interview. And the reason why is because there's very few moments where when you're doing this job, people are watching, but you don't really know if people are watching. And what I loved about that little viral moment where I interviewed Sawyer, he had a big bloody nose after doing a quarterback sneak and getting a touchdown, is it was so human. And that's always what I'm going for. And he was great. And what I loved about it is he got so much attention for it. He got so much love. And that's all you want, right? You want people to see the talent that's out there and the U Sports talent. And I mean, he's just hilarious. I wish him all the best. I know he's kind of looking at maybe doing some football in Europe. So I'll maybe go out there and do a bloody nose sideline interview at some point. But either way, I would say that would be a highlight. Yeah.
Who would you say is your favorite broadcaster in terms of play-by-play for any sport? Doesn't matter. Like, what voice in your mind is just like, oh, this is my favorite?
I'm gonna go with Matt Devlin on that because I love watching the Raptors and I really love it for honestly all their broadcasters to me. I love the energy that they bring. But Matt Devlin, and I particularly like it because I was reading actually Peter Mansbridge's book called Extraordinary Canadians. If you haven't read it, you should, because it's telling stories of other people. And Matt Devlin is in that book and kind of shares he became a Canadian citizen for the love of all that's good. And he's just a really cool story. So I think contemporary wise, I really enjoy his calls. But Chris Cuthbert is always close to the top of my mind there. He's fantastic. And he does the sports that I'm interested in. And not that I'm not interested in basketball, but hockey, football, and has been around through so much. So he's great. And also a great mentor for people too.
Daniella, I want to thank you so much for having been on today's episode. It's great to get to chat with you and finally have you on as a guest. I was really, really glad to be able to chat football, CFL, Riders, and all the likes in between of why it's so fantastic to be a sports fan in the prairies.
I mean, when you put it that way, it's all the things I know and love. So I really appreciate the fact that you reached out and we got to have this chat. Thanks so much.
And thank you to the listener for enjoying today's episode with sports broadcaster Daniella Ponticelli.